Thank you for tuning in to this Business and Arts webinar focusing on developing and retaining sponsors as an audience during these times of COVID-19 with Jay MacGillivray. This webinar was originally presented as part of Business and Arts ArtsVest program to 156 arts organizations and is now available to the public as part of our commitment to provide up-to-date resources and to keep the arts sector informed. Jay MacGillivray combines skills in business development, strategic communications, technology, and remote working with a passionate interest in supporting the local arts, nonprofit, and social enterprise sectors. He focuses on ensuring an organization's business goals and aspirations align with their core activities in their sales, messaging, and technology delivery. In this webinar, Jay will guide us through developing and retaining sponsors as an audience during these times of crisis and answer questions from the ArtsFest participants.
The original topic was going to be audience development and retention. And things are a little bit different right now where everything has changed very much. And there's so many people that have different types of audiences, different types of retention thoughts going on. Plus, I mean, just people are just in kind of survival mode and stuff right now as well. And so what we thought was it'd be worthwhile to talk about one particular type of artist or one particular type of audience, and that is the sponsor. Because we are in a very different time right now. And one of the things that people would, in times of unrest and uncertainty that I'm sure most of you are going through, you might think that things like discussing sponsors might not be the most important thing to do right now, the most essential thing to do right now when everybody's just talking about survival and how do we actually do day-to-day operations. But the reality is that there's a tremendous opportunity right now. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and just explain not so much about how we're going to make pitches to sponsors in the future, but I want to talk about just a little bit about how what the sponsorship relationship looks like now and explain to some of the opportunities and just have you think a little bit differently about what some of those some really cool potential kind of development could happen. And what we also, because we understand that there's this a wide varied audience on here. There's about 150 people on here today, which is amazing. And there'll be a wide variety of backgrounds and different regions and stuff in the audience. I've actually been very, very lucky in that I've gotten to play many, many roles within the arts community, from a fan to a board member and doing leadership there, to a technology developer, to doing strategic communications, and I've even been a remote worker, which now a whole bunch of us are right now. And so what we thought is we talk about the first half of our time together would be about sponsorship and some of the different ways of looking at sponsorship right now, and they have different opportunities. But then we kind of wanted to open it up to a wide-ranging Q&A. I think, Monica, yeah, we could probably go to the next slide. And we could talk about there's potential topics that I thought we could talk about in a Q&A where we can definitely keep going into and delve deeper into the sponsorship after the point that I kind of leave it at. But then there's also a possibility to talk about technology, to talk about remote working, to talk about strategic communications at this time. I was on a tremendous webinar, and I've actually got a little bit of experience with this, with fund development and event management. But there's been really big discussions around events online, specifically fundraising events. But I mean, I thought that it might be kind of interesting to pass on some of that knowledge, see if you have questions. And then been on a lot of boards. I mean, a lot of you all have boards, and if you have any questions around that. So I just wanted to kind of open it up in our second half of our discussion, because I'm somebody who's had, I guess, many different perspectives. We thought let's open up that conversation and go that way. So those are some of the things we'll get onto. Very good. The first thing about sponsorship, and I think this is probably the most important thing, slide that I even want to talk about today. And I think it's kind of, we'll go into a little more depth after this, but I think this is probably the essential part about the way that we think about sponsorships. Everybody here at ArtsVest is looking for different ways of raising funds right now. Sponsorship is obviously something that you're doing within this program, but I wanted to make sure that we reiterate that sponsorship is in fact a relationship. And so what that means is that it's not just you going to ask somebody for something because you need money for doing, for putting on your show, for putting on your event, or you need in-kind kind of services for something. It's not a one-way street in this way. It's actually a relationship, because both groups, you and your sponsor, both have to have your needs met. And what's really important about that part is understanding what your sponsor's needs are. Why are they giving you money to do work with you or to promote you? I mean, there's a number of different things, and we'll go into a few more of the specifics around that. But the reality is, and when I was a sponsor, we sponsored a number of our organizations. So maybe we put on about 6 or 7 sponsorships a year. And each time I was getting a tremendous marketing benefit out of it. So I think it's very, very important to understand that it's a relationship, and that you are offering something of value to the sponsor in return. And whenever you're thinking about a sponsorship relationship. The second part for today is that your world has changed. It's been turned upside down. It's everybody's working from home. They're working online. Seasons are being canceled. They're being pushed off. There's uncertainty around sponsorship and obviously, but also just general funding, revenue generation. If you present artists, how are they doing? Are they going to be around when all this comes back on? And when does it actually happen? Like when do we actually come back from this situation? There's a lot of different thoughts about that. Some incredibly optimistic and some much more pessimistic. And in the middle there is some very realistic timelines. But everything has changed for everyone. And I think it's really important that to recognize that for the sponsors, their life has turned upside down as well. Most of them are companies and organizations who are dealing with the exact same things. Am I going to be able to keep my staff, or do I have to lay people off? Where's my sales and revenue going to be coming from? I've got this big building. What am I going to do to generate revenue for it? Are there government programs? All of those things. And so this is actually a great kind of an evening out, I guess, equal kind of situation, where you and the sponsor that you'd be looking to ask money for isn't exactly in a very similar situation. Next slide, Monica. This is just a slide from a group called Classy, who a lot of you might know, and in the links and resources, almost anybody I talk about here today, I've just got a page of just a short group of links to websites. But this is something that I thought was really interesting and relevant for today. They're an American organization, but it still definitely applies. Is that nonprofits are going into a sponsorship relationship potentially to increase awareness, to acquire new supporters, potentially the employees of a corporate sponsor, or if the sponsor brings friends, or if they just have a big audience that they tell people about. And it's legitimization of your brand when you've got somebody who comes on board and puts a big stamp on, I want to help your organization, and I believe in your organization, and I'm giving money to this organization, or something of value. But at the same time, a corporation may be looking to improve their brand perception, that they're actually involved in a nonprofit sector. They might be looking to attract new customers right now, and in this situation that we're all living in, that's going to be something that almost everybody is looking at, because everything is going to be changing, and how you talk to your customers is going to change. And it could be a situation where they're looking to increase employee satisfaction. This has long been a thing. I know that I would we would have our corporate gatherings and our company gatherings were all based around different groups that we sponsored and going to their events. And so it'd be something that would be our entire staff and my partners. We all looked forward to events that we were putting on that we sponsored. Then there was also a chance to mingle with our clients, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go on. So this is just the saying that there really has to be. There is no relationship if only one person is winning. I think we all kind of recognize that, but that's essential for how we approach sponsorships. Next slide, please. Cool. Okay, so we're going to talk about 3 different steps. Right now, as I was saying, I mean, everybody's world is in flux. I mean, everything is disrupted and a little bit uncertain. And now it's time to take a few steps and to recalibrate. And we're going to just go up to the point of saying who potential sponsors could be. But these are the 3 steps that you need to take at this very early stage of starting to reimagine what a sponsorship relationship could be. The first step that I think is important is, if you do have sponsors, they're existing sponsors, it's really important that you go and talk to them right away. They should be some of the first calls that you make. Now, some of you might have been thinking about, and I probably already have, been in touch with people who have been financially backing you before because you're in desperate, likely financial situations, or potentially will be in the near future if things remain. But I think it's really important that you go in and talk to the sponsors, and it's more than and when you are talking to them, I think that you want to have transparency. You don't want to be saying, "Hey, everything's great, everything's rosy, and don't worry about us, everything's going well." That's obviously not going to be the situation for almost anybody right now. So I think that it's actually a really important time to be transparent and to go and talk to your sponsors right now. And I mean, you want to talk about things like, what has happened to your season, what happened to your events, where are your finances at, what is your staff situation, have you had to lay people off, or are you trying to keep people on? All those kinds of things are going to be very important, and they're actually very interesting today because you're going to have a conversation of equals in a lot of ways, of like, what are you doing? Here's what we're doing. For the transparency, I think it's important to be very open and honest, but I also think that it's important to do a little bit of kind of inward thinking and navel gazing about where you are today, because you don't want to be going in when you have this initial talk with the sponsors and it's just like, oh my world's falling apart. I need help, because, as I say, everybody's in the situation now. I think you want to take it, when you have that, before you have that first conversation, a little bit farther, saying, hey, this is where we are at right now. This is what we're doing, and this is what our plans are. They're not fully baked yet, but at least we're kind of thinking about how we're actually going to approach things. Yeah, but when you actually are talking to the sponsors, I mean, it really is a very, very simple conversation. How are you doing? What is their current situation? But I think the next ones are actually really important, is to recognize that if they're in a relationship with you, they get something being in the relationship. So that you are in a pause, more than likely, you can say, how can I help you? And how can I help you as a sponsor? Is there something that we can do? And then even, is there some kind of shared plan? You might find in this discussion that, we're both trying to launch a new season or a new product or something in September or October of next year, or November. So you might find that you've got a similar schedule of things you want to do. You also might be saying that, we're going to have to find a way to do some things online. And the sponsor could be trying to say, I need to find ways to reach people online because all my foot traffic has gone away. You might share more than you'd actually think right now. And then you want to use this information while we're talking to existing sponsors to the knowledge that you get from there, and especially knowledge like, how could I help you? What of value do I, as an arts organization, bring to the help of the sponsors? And when you're talking to these people you already have a relationship with, there's an awful lot of information that you can gain from that. Monica, if you want to go to the next slide, because what the next one is like, what is to actually start to define what it is that you do have to offer after you've kind of had an initial discussion with sponsors, assuming that you have sponsors, or that you can talk to people that are similar in or that are friends, I guess, of the organization. Once you have that, you want to spend a little bit of time, and again, looking at the navel a bit, and like, what could be a sponsor outreach program or an outreach plan? What do I think that my sponsors or potential sponsors, what do I think that I might be able to have to offer to them? And again, you probably got some information from the initial sponsors that you talked to. But now it's time to say, okay, what is it that I can provide? What do I have to offer? And it really is. It's an amazing thing that people do have to offer that you might not think about. Like, when is my new professional offering? When is my next outreach activity? And one of the things that's interesting here is that, are there new properties that you can offer sponsors? I know Monica and I were even talking about this yesterday, in that now that we're doing things all online, now that events might be happening online, there's a number of different opportunities that, for example, in Zoom, you've probably many have seen, and because I'm not going to be controlling this this screenshot right now. I can't flip it on myself, but it's possible that you can see, if anybody that's using Zoom now, that you can change your background. And people put up, moons and stars and other different pictures about there. And it just adds a little something, and it's kind of entertaining to do that. But the reality is that that could be a place, if you were doing anything online and talking to your patrons, your donors, or anybody that's talking to, you actually could have a logo of somebody who is sharing or who is actually a sponsor of yours, and another way to get their name out, as saying that in this tough and uncertain time, I'm a dance company, and in this tough and uncertain time, the dance school that is down the street, actually, we put their logo up because they are sponsoring us right now, and that could be a way for them to get some value out of, just getting some value.
Hey, Jake,
go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, just a heads up. You're having a bit of kind of blips in your mic. I'm not sure.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah, it's like a bit of static almost. Maybe if you try going without your video, like if we stop your video, maybe that'll help the audio slightly.
Okay. I will try going up with video.
Well, your audio sounded good right there, actually.
How's that?
Perfect, actually. Thank you.
Oh, good. All right, perfect. Okay, very good. Sorry about that, folks. Didn't realize that the sound was bouncing around on you a bit. Where was I? Well, basically just talking that we do have value, and there do things that we can provide. I mean, some of the things that we might be able to provide is new audiences that a sponsor might be interested in talking to. Again, I was just kind of mentioning about, I'm not sure when this cut off or not, but if you're a dance company, and there might be a really good opportunity for if you haven't talked to them yet, the dance schools or the people that actually provide dance footwear for schools and people to go, people that are aligned with what it is that you do. The same audience that comes to your dance productions might be very interested in buying their stuff. So I mean, there really is a potential new access to new audiences that a sponsor might be interested in. And if you're aware that, oh yeah, I've got 600 dance fans that come to my season every year, that's a really interesting avenue that potentially a sponsor could be interested in. Also, the online stuff. If you're going to be doing any kind of online events or any kind of online projection through Zoom or something else, it might be really possible for you to provide placement of logos on your online sales. And who are the people who might be interested in that? Well, Zoom for one. And in fact, Monica, you had actually mentioned that there's a couple of different programs that are going on right now for online sponsorship. And I'm not sure if you can take over the volume or not right now. But if not, there's some definite. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so there's currently one offered by Facebook and National Arts Center. I can actually pull that up right now quickly by showing my Chrome window. So essentially what's happening with that one is that Facebook has partnered with the National Arts Center, and they're looking to bring a lot of performances online. And so if you're a Canadian artist who has lost revenue due to not being able to perform at the moment, you can enter this program and apply, because they're having programming pretty much every day, as you can see looking through the page. They have the upcoming events. So if you're an organization who is someone who can perform or put on any sort of aspect like that, it's a really cool time. So it's run through Facebook Live, I believe. But honestly, there's a lot of other opportunities like this as well. So if you're looking to stream any sort of performance or something, you can look into YouTube has live streaming. I don't know if they have any partnership programs or funds. I know also another one that does online streaming is Twitch, which is a video game streaming website, but they have a large charity aspect to them as well. And currently they're looking to expand and get more online performers and just see what they can offer too. So like any sort of arts event that you're looking to put, why not just try to see what's out there and what you could potentially offer. So I'll segue back to the presentation PowerPoint now as well, and then hand it back over to you as well, Jay.
Perfecto.
Yeah. Oh, and then what Jay mentioned as well earlier was the changing background. So if you have a sponsor and that's something that you're looking to do, you can even change your background on something like Zoom. I'll show that off a bit later, but yeah, for now, I'll get back to the presentation.
Thank you, Monica. That's great. I think that I am. Can you hear me now? Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Monica. That's great. And and that's the thing, is that there are so many different ways of actually going and looking at potential properties. And depending on your sophistication of how much you've done with sponsorship before, properties are really just the are different things that you could offer, and you could provide a sponsor that is of value to them. Some people think of it as a place to put a logo, but it also could be different things that that you go and provide. So step one is talking to your existing sponsors, understanding where they're at. Also, just creating a really valuable relationship with your existing sponsors who have already committed to you, and just seeing if you could increase the capacity there. The second step is what are new things, like what could be new offerings and properties that that you have, or just new ways that you want to offer things to sponsors in thinking about it as a relationship. And the third step is who is the target audience, and you actually want to spend a little bit of time and going and looking at, again, I use the dance company as an example. That if you are a dance company and like, you should be thinking about like-minded people that you could approach, but also be thinking about, if you're doing things online, then you might want to approach telecom companies and telephone companies, or other people that are actually doing unique things there. And if you are creating audience or creating content for something like the National Arts Center, then I mean, they're a potential sponsor as well, because they'd be giving you money to create sponsorship. They'd be promoting you, but then you could also be looking at, well, what I would like to do is as well is promote you on my site and on my offerings as well. And you then have a potential, when you start to look at what the types of audiences are that you might be looking at, and who craves the benefits that I have. Once you identify what those benefits are, or who is looking for that new purpose and who is looking for that new connection, once you identify that, you can start to reach out to them. Another interesting component of this is just the last part of the sponsorship, is that when you start thinking in different ways, like for example, Facebook is doing some things, National Arts Center is doing some things. Once you start to identify what properties that you have and the types of people that you want to target, you're likely going to be able to start to check in to see if your staff or board might even have connections in these new worlds that you're going to start going into. And that is very, very powerful, because the very best way to acquire new sponsors is to have a very, very tight and direct connection, or potentially a personal connection that will allow you to have that initial conversation. Yeah, so I think that as far as the sponsorship component, these are some resources and links. Actually, I'll mention a few of these. Classy organization, or classy.org, provides a tremendous amount of and the one slide that I showed before, corporate sponsorships for the nonprofits, and just basics and all the different things that you need to think about. Going and taking, there's a lot of free resources that they have, and it's really, really powerful. Another a number of webinars that have been on, called Prosperous Strategies. Again, another American organization, but I tend to think that the American and Canadian experiences at this moment are very, very similar. They've got a whole section on their website now dealing just with communication, and they call it fundraising, because they largely focus on fundraising, but it's in the COVID time, and the resources that they have are looking at many different aspects of COVID and communications. And there's actually, I was on a webinar last week about putting on a virtual fundraising event, but and I'll make that webinar, those slides, available. It talks about actually an awful lot of the same thoughts that are in here. If you were to replace donor is the word they talk about as far as the fundraising events with sponsor, almost all of the wording there would make an awful lot of sense. You start to recognize things like that there are actually a lot of people out there that are looking for different ways to reach brand new audiences as their businesses change. So there's a lot of opportunity there. It also starts going into what is the technology that is provided that to be able to take things online. And so just some really, really excellent resources there. You can get lost in there. And as we're all sitting at home right now, sitting online, it's a great place to go. And there's another group when I think about partnerships and sponsorship, I always think about the partnership group. Brent Berrudes is the kind of the one of the, or has been one of the real gurus in this space in Canada. Some of the documents and resources that are online now are a little bit older, but I think that they're incredibly relevant as kind of a baseline of how do we approach sponsorship and how do we value some things that are properties. They'll need to be updated when you're actually going and thinking about really getting to the details of that, but it's a really great starting point just to see how people are thinking about and approaching this sector. So that is our talk about sponsorship to this point. Very happy to keep going down, and there will be a lot of questions I would anticipate that are going to come out of this segment. But I also, as you said, we wanted to, because I've got a lot of different perspectives, and a lot of different ways that I've been able to work with different organizations, both as a sponsor or as a technology provider or a communications expert or just as a fan. So I thought that might be some topics that you might recognize here that might be interesting to you. And at this point, I think, Monica, you've probably just been gathering a bunch of questions.
Yeah, already we have a few coming in and more.
Awesome.
Happening right now as well. So
awesome. Fantastic.
At this time, if you have a question on any of these topics, or if there's been anything that you've been curious about that you've heard so far, go ahead and ask it in the Q&A pod. That way I'll be able to see it and then read your question to Jay as well. So our first question.
My first question is that how do I get rid of that picture of mine from about 8 years ago? Yeah.
No worries.
No, I'm not worried about it. But one of these days, that'll be my next thing, is looking for a resource to help me with that.
So I've asked you to start your video again. So I think hopefully it should work now. We'll see. If there's a few more blips, we'll adjust that on the fly. So thanks for your patience on that, everyone. Okay, so cool. Our first question comes from Patricia Silver, and Patricia asks, is it okay to approach a new sponsor now, or would it be perceived as insensitive?
It's an excellent time to approach people now. And when you go back to the first step that I mentioned about wanting to go and talk to your existing sponsors, or even approaching new sponsors, I think it would be insensitive to start phoning people who are large companies that potentially have a lot of money that you don't have a relationship with, and telling them the difficult story that you're having right now. I think that a lot of calls would come in with that. But again, I think if you are able to spend a little bit of time and say, here's the situation, this is what we're looking to do, and we actually do have some ideas around what we're going to be doing to help ourselves, but we do need help from sponsorships and growing. But also recognize that the sponsor that you're calling is having the same kind of problems that you are right now. I don't think it's insensitive at all, and I think it's actually a very powerful thing to have a recognition, and both sides having a recognition that wow, we're all in the same situation here right now. And I really think that it's a chance to, if handled well, it's a real chance to create a brand new relationship, and potentially a very, very strong relationship, because you're coming at a place where you're both looking for solutions. So just phoning up somebody, and again, as a transactional situation where you're looking for money and you're not offering anything to them, or haven't really thought about anything to offer, I think that would be a problem. But I think looking at it as a real relationship, where you both are going to get something out of it, I don't think that's a problem at all right now. In fact, it's a really big opportunity.
Awesome. Yeah, no, agreed as well. And then our next question comes from Anna Pilegi, and Anna says, please please share some ideas on where/how to source new prospects. And then there's a follow-up, but it's getting them to want to speak to you. Many cut you short. How do we get around that?
That's interesting, because that is almost a sales question in the sense of how do you call people, like where do you get your prospect lists, and what happens when you just call them? And I think it's really important that in a sponsorship situation to recognize that, again, that you're looking to provide a sponsor something that is of value to them. And again, it's not about I'm trying to sell you something. I'm trying to get you and your money to help me in my cause. You're coming at it from a perspective of how do we both win here? What is it that I can provide you? And I think that's a very powerful starting point. That gets past the people hanging up, because if you're just saying, hey, I'm calling from this organization, do you have any money? Then yeah, especially at this time, and especially if it isn't, if you are phoning somebody who's just laid off 80% of their staff and they're not really sure what's going to be happening, then I mean, it's not a good approach in the best of times. It's a difficult approach now. And so I think that being very aware and tactful, and recognizing again that it's a relationship, and you are approaching a brand new person who you haven't talked to before with some thoughts around how you might have a value for them. Maybe it's the size of your audience, maybe it's the reach that you have, maybe it's just a very specific thing. But you should do your research and start to understand what it is that you could offer them. And again, go back to your original sponsors that you do have right now, to have those initial conversations, because you might be surprised at why they say the value that they get from you, and that might be something that informs your future conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Our next question comes from June Reed, and June asks about interest in crowdsourced funding. Is there a Canadian company that works with nonprofits? Crowdsourced funding, you're always going to want to be careful because so many of them take cuts from what you raise as well. But I don't know if you know more about that and want to speak to anything.
Oh, definitely. Matter of fact, I was just working for a couple of years at a startup that was largely around donations, like being able to manage events with selling tickets, but also donations. But I think that to your point about taking a cut, that is very true. When you have Canada Helps, for example, I mean, they manage all the donations. They don't really do a crowd funding kind of thing, but the GoFundMe's do, and Facebook is doing those things. And there's actually a number of different companies that are out there. Generous Solutions was a company that I was at for a couple of years, trying to grow that, and they have crowdfunding options. And it's interesting because almost everybody takes some kind of a cut in one of two ways. They either are charging a percentage, usually a very small percentage, and the reality is that most people are used to, for the convenience of spending money online, there definitely is a possibility for doing things online, doing some good crowdfunding, and most of your donors are actually going to want to pay their 2% or 4% fees on your behalf, so that the money that they want to give to you doesn't come out of your pocket. And most of those crowdfunding platforms allow that. And then you have like a GoFundMe, for example, which they don't charge fees at this point. But what they do is they ask for tips. And the reality is that they make a lot more money just by your donors giving tips while they do that. You've also got a number of other crowdsourcing ones for like the Ride to Conquer Cancer, and those kind of platforms exist out there. I think that there's a number of different platforms, but each of them are kind of specific to what type of event that you're putting on right now. And again, some will take some kind of fees, and if they're not taking fees, they're making money in other ways. One way, if they don't charge fees, is that they might be reselling the data of your donors. You want to make sure that anytime that you are doing any kind of crowdfunding, that you own the data and you have access to the data from the donors that you've generated that are donating from you. So that's something I'm more than happy to talk more about offline, because there's a few questions to ask first about the types of events you're doing, and the types of crowdfunding you're doing. But I guess that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, there's a lot of really cool platforms that are out there. There's more and more coming along line of the day all the time, and I'd be happy to connect more on that.
Yeah, and then that's a reminder to the organizations watching. So if you want to approach Jay for a one-on-one, just do that through Mentor City afterwards, and then that way you can figure out exactly what you want to talk about before that one-on-one session. Okay,
thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Our next question comes from Mary Elizabeth, and Mary Elizabeth asks, how can we work with a sponsor that is a small business facing possible bankruptcy due to the COVID situation?
I think that it comes back to the relationship part. It comes back to understanding, like, I mean, if they're in a facing bankruptcy situation, and actually, maybe I should have clarified this different. Is it an existing sponsor or somebody that you want to approach? If it's somebody that you're just approaching out of the blue, then you have to be aware of what their situation is right now. And if you are approaching them, then hopefully that you have something very valuable for them, whether it's access to a new audience or something along those lines that you can provide to them. And if it is an existing sponsor, I think that having that conversation up front with them, what's your situation, what's going on, is there something that we could do that can help both of us out? But it's, I mean, we're in COVID time, it's community time. And especially in the world that we live in the kind of the arts world and the nonprofit world, we're looking to serve, we're looking to help. And I think that, yeah, there's some really interesting ways that you can do that with partnerships, but we also have to have a lot of empathy for people that are going through tough situations right now. And you truly want to not look for how you can take advantage of the situation. That's for sure. You definitely want to look at how you can benefit both sides. And that is really going to help you in your long-term sponsorship acquisition too.
Awesome, thank you. So our next question comes from Becky, and Becky asks, can you give us some examples of customer activation or sponsorship activation opportunities that you have done, and any ones that you think could work during the age of COVID-19?
I was very lucky. My last big company that I was a partner in, and I was in charge of business development. And what I actually took an approach that, because we worked with an awful lot of arts organizations and nonprofit organizations, many that were either putting on festivals or had large events that they put on, what I would do is I would sponsor their events. And how we would sponsor, actually, no, I'll take that back. It wasn't quite a sponsor of events. What I would do is, because we were providing online services to these companies, we would donate a certain amount of hours of in-kind services a year for work that they needed to have done anyway every year. And so we would donate a certain amount of that. And in return, what I would ask for is to have logo placement everywhere, so people that went to their events would know that we were there as a sponsor. But I'd also ask for tickets because I wanted to bring our staff and my partners, but I also wanted to invite all of the different arts leaders and nonprofit leaders to come and enjoy the event with us. And so there's a number of different things that happened there. But what it got to is about, I think we got up to 8 or 9 in-kind sponsorships a year that we did. And it was a tremendous activation, because what we would do is we would show up as a service provider for a festival, for example, and we would show up with 50 or 60 or 70 people that would be coming to this festival or this event. We would, and some of them we would, like, say, I don't know, in a music festival, we would sponsor the comedy part of it every year. So our name and logo would be on the stage for the comedy stuff that was going on. We'd bring people to that. So it was a big benefit to the festival or our partner. It was a huge benefit to us, because what I would do is I would just collect art leaders' names, considering and nonprofit organization leaders' names, and I would just get to invite them. 8 times a year. And so they would look at that and it would be amazing. I would get no responses from a number of people, but I would run into them over like 2 years later, and they'd be saying, wow, it is so cool that you're still sponsoring all of these organizations. You really believe in this sector. And it defined the brand of who we were. And so for me, I didn't have to do any kind of marketing. I didn't have to do an awful lot of outreach. It just became our entire business development was around people recognizing us for being associated with all the art for arts work and nonprofit work and word of mouth. And so that was a massive activation for us. And it was a lot of fun too.
Yeah, and then absolutely that brings to mind too that checking in with your sponsors and just reminding them that you're an arts organization that's currently involved in ArtsVest, which is an amazing opportunity for not only you, but them as well, because there's that matching funds component. So if you get an in-cash sponsorship that's from a new sponsor, that's an 100% match on the end of ArtsVest, or even alternately, if it's someone who can't really give you any sort of cash sponsorship right now, but they're willing to do something in kind, like web development or anything of the sort, helping you out that way, that's still eligible for those sponsorship funds. So just wanted to reiterate that as well for organizations.
And that's great, Monica. That's a good one. I just want to reiterate that too, because I've had that come up on a few different of my mentor sessions. Having somebody who is going to give you matching dollars, I can't even tell you how important that is for donors or sponsors, that they could give you $1,000 and it becomes $2,000. That is a massive selling feature for somebody to give you money, especially when it's a time limited program like ArtsVest.
Absolutely. Our next question comes from Alina Godfrey, and Alina asks, how can we use social media and our website effectively to build on existing sponsorships and potentially gain new ones? Do you mind if I jump in actually?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for gaining new ones, I was doing a bit of research on this beforehand, and you'll notice that I have a bunch of tabs open at the top of my computer. But what I wanted to show a bunch of organizations is there's an Instagram called Curious City. There's stuff like this from multiple cities around Canada, and they're just looking to feature content more than ever now. So looking into them, like you can see this is a paid partnership for this one, but approaching them and saying, hey, how much do you normally charge for a post? It could be a good time to reach out to them, just because I know times are hard for so many organizations. And like I was saying before, that comes into play as an in-kind sponsorship if they're doing some marketing for you as well. And a classic one is Toronto Life, whom I know sponsors many organizations. They're actually a sponsor of business and arts for multiple things as well. So now's the time to reach out and just see what's out there. It's a long weekend coming up too. It could be a good time to do some research if you have some free time, but that's just something I wanted to show before I passed it over to you, Jay.
Absolutely, and that's a great way to look at it. It's also interesting about when you're defining what you have as properties or things that are important to potential sponsors. Your reach in social media and the reach of your website is actually a really powerful thing. For example, if you could say that when you're going out to somebody and say that, I have 10,000 people a month come to my website. Tickets, maybe you do different things that where this action is coming on the site, or I've got 10,000 followers on Instagram or on Twitter. And part of what I'll be doing as our sponsorship is that I will put your logo on our website, and I will do 2 tweets or 3 Instagram posts about your business for being a sponsor. And then what you're doing is you are then using your social media and your website presence as a commodity for a sponsor. Because if a sponsor says, "Oh, you've got 5,000 or 10,000 Instagram followers," all of your followers are probably people who would be interested in my service because they're very closely aligned. Wow, getting in front of those people 2 or 3 times would be incredibly valuable to them as strictly on a marketing for their organization or business. And there are other ways to do that. It's a little bit of an involved conversation because it goes into the different types of strategy. But I think of what you're actually doing on your website and what you're actually using your social media for. But I think that's probably the most obvious way is to use the numbers and the stats and the following that you've built up yourself to entice sponsors to say that, hey, I've got something to reach an audience for you. And again, that's another something that, as far as the more detailed part of like adjusting or changing a website strategy or social media strategy, that's something I could definitely talk about in more detail on a kind of one-to-one.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to give you a heads up, we have 13 questions queued currently. So if you have a time constraint, just let me know and we can address the other ones later.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm good to go for another little while. So.
Perfect. Okay. Our next question comes from Lucy, and Lucy says, we are doing more on Instagram with workshops and check-ins. How does one place a value on Instagram as a sponsorship property? Do you put a value on your followers, the number of people you reach in a live workshop? Any advice?
I would, I'd be looking at both. I would be trying to gain as much information as you can about your Instagram thing. If you spend a lot of time working on it, I would know how many followers, how many people that you're actually reaching, and how much your stuff is being pushed out there, because it goes back to understanding from your sponsor what they think is important to them. They probably have some kind of idea about their business. If they actually are looking to, if they think that Instagram is something that's important to them and being promoted on your Instagram, they've got some ideas of what it is that they're looking to reach, and how much traffic you might be able to drive to their business, or how much credibility they can create from their business. So I would be collecting all of your stats on all your social media. And then as far as valuing it, there's a few different ways to value it. There's no standard way to value. There are companies that actually, that's all they do is they value social media properties and provide that for you. I don't think you have to go to that length unless you're doing a massive campaign, but yeah, there's definitely value that can be created from it, and some of the details and specifics can be talked about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question comes from Rocio, and Rocio asks, if we move programming online, how do we make it profitable? It seems like people are looking for free streaming and programming, and how do we make it worth for people to pay for programming?
Very good question, because I mean that is one of the issues that's coming up now, and I'm sure you've all seen some of the Facebook posts or Instagram posts or any posts that are out there about, wow, these are the artists are the ones you want to cut all the funding for, but they're the ones who are providing content to get us through this particular time. And with the hope of being, I know Calgary Arts Development here in Calgary is really looking at that, and has long said and long encouraged artists to never do anything for free, because there has to be some kind of a value which is attached to it. So this particular time, I mean, that is what people are doing, is putting things online, and people are used to that. But I think if you are going to do some things online, there's a few different ways of doing it. You could put some stuff online to entice, but you could put other things behind a subscription that people access by giving you $20 or $30 or $40 a month kind of thing to get access to a number of different programs. If it's going to be, it's going to be a hard thing to figure out. Our dance productions can be going on in empty theaters, or theatrical productions can be happening in empty theaters, or CPOs performing for people without audiences in the next little while. And you're right. How do you value that? Subscriptions is a good one. Potentially having sponsors bankroll an event might be a way to actually do it as well, because if you have a large sponsor presence and 500 people come online to come see one of your performances, because all of a sudden your reach is not just who's the bums in seats, but it actually is potentially a wider audience. I mean, you could have a national audience, or an Ontario-wide or an Alberta-wide audience, or the rural communities outside of the major cities. If you're doing things like that, all of a sudden your reach is growing. That might make your property more valuable. So I would say in that situation, it really depends on the type of programming that you're going to be offering, but subscriptions and enhanced sponsorships are two different ways you can look at that for sure. And there are other ways to do it, but it's also, we do have to make a pivot away from just free online content as well. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, so our next question comes from Aaron, and Aaron says, can you offer some ideas on partner/sponsor recognition for events/programming being moved to live streaming? Given a lot of print program and posters may not be distributed if we stay in this type of physical distancing climate.
I would look to a few different things. One is logos in the background. I mean, we were talking about that before, and we might even be able to see that. Yeah.
I'll do my best to show that off. I'm not sure if I can during a webinar, but during a
Yeah.
meeting.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah.
Oh,
Definitely.
no, I think I can here. Yeah.
Mhm.
So you can change your background through Zoom or so many other online streaming services as well. So like potentially this could be a sponsor logo rather than just cartoon flames or rather than just the office background. But that's one really easy, simple activation opportunity that would generate a lot of eyes on a logo for a sponsor.
Yeah, and when you're doing online events like that, the introductory emails to say, here's the link that to come to this event. When people are accessing it through your website, for example, there's a lot of different places that you could put sponsored logos, for example, and that's kind of following the traditional model of print programs and brochures and posters and those kinds of things. I mean, there's a number of different ways to do that online. And again, I mean, then you start getting into kind of Twitter and Instagram, Facebook strategies along that as well. As far as, hey, we really just want to shout out to the sponsor who has helped us. Then you're getting, and it's interesting because it's you have a larger number of you can actually quantitatively look at the numbers of people that have seen the Instagram post or or what's on your website rather than a print brochure, for example. So you actually can start to give some feedback to people, and they can start seeing if you actually say, here's a logo on my or here's my Instagram post, and now they're going over to your site, they will be able to see how many people are actually coming to their site. So that you can actually start quantitatively looking at the value of that. Podcasts right now, they talk about people give shout outs to the sponsors all the time. And it's actually very, very valuable. I mean, people at this point, it's turning into the podcast people are kind of like the new Instagram influencers. They're getting a whole lot of credibility and credence right now, and they are driving a lot of the traffic. So if you're putting on something live, but actually just saying, by the way, we want to talk about this incredible sponsor of ours, I mean, like that's another good way of doing it. So there's a number of ways that you can actually, it's going to require a little bit of innovation, but there's models for how people are doing it right now for sure. And in fact, I'd suggest that they're much more valuable and sustainable than the traditional.
Absolutely agreed. And then ad revenue is a huge one to think of. Like I know
of course.
the streaming website, Twitch now, I have a personal connection for a friend who works there, and then they have bumped up their advertising per hour from 1.5 minutes. They'll now be showing 3 minutes of ads, but then that's more ad revenue for people who are live streaming there. And then additionally, one more that I was thinking of was even Zoom right after this will pop all the participants who are viewing to our survey page. By the way, please let us know what you'd like to see in upcoming webinars, but you can customize that link. So you could potentially send that to a sponsor's website or anything like that. So there's so many things to think of.
Yeah. Well, and that even goes back to the previous question as well, is like just there are so many different properties and so many different ways to actually start to value your online. And different ways of advertising. Well, sorry, and different ways of actually generating income from live events that are going on that potentially your audience won't pay for, but somebody's going to pay for one way or another.
Our next question comes from Carlos, and that's thoughts on converting existing audience members to donors/sponsors. I'll be right back in 2 minutes. I just need a very quick bathroom break. I'm sorry.
Got it. I'll dance. Yeah, no, that's. I would think that this would be a great time to be doing that. I was talking earlier about online fundraisers, and I tend to think with the technology that's available right now, with the amount of people that can, there's just the technology available to actually put on online fundraising type of events, whether it's silent auctions, whether it's raffle tickets, whether it's anything along those lines that you actually want to go and put on. That's a really interesting way of actually going and turning people that are an audience and saying, hey, this is our plan. This is what we're doing. We're trying to raise X amount of dollars because we're going to achieve this. We're going to keep our staff employed through December. And this is what we want to raise this much money for. Or we're going to put on this event here. Or we're trying to recoup our loss of sponsorship dollars because 3 of our sponsors went bankrupt. I mean, like those kinds of things are going to be happening at this time. And I think that's a really good potential for turning donors into, or turning audience members into potential donors and sponsors. And there's a number of different things out there that you can be having an event that's going on, or a promotion that's going on, and you can collect online donations for sure. It's very easy to transfer people over to have a donation page set up. Those pieces of software out there are very, very easy to run. Very good platforms. And yeah, so I think that this is and especially with the people that are your audience that really care about you, that want you to succeed. They want you to be around. It's a great time to do it. But I again, treat your donors and your audience that you're trying to make donors, treat them as somebody that you're in a relationship with as well. It's not just a one way. You're providing something of service for them. They give money to you, or they come to your event, so they buy your tickets for some reason. They get something out of it. And continue to treat them as somebody that they're going to get something out of it. And if you've got a particular ask, it's a great time to be doing it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Allison, for hopping in for me.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question comes from Aaron, and Aaron says, I love the idea of approaching existing sponsors to offer a hand of mutual support.
Mm-hmm.
In a situation where most of our existing sponsors may be smaller or medium-sized businesses that are struggling, what would be some examples of appropriate things to ask for from them in this time? I think
good question.
Like Jane mentioned earlier,
Mm-hmm.
to start it off, like seeing
Mm-hmm.
how you can help them is a really great way to open that conversation. And then coming to mind too, what you would want them to help you with, and just meeting a reasonable middle.
Mm-hmm. I think that there's that. Also, I think it really helps when you do that navel gazing and you say, what is it that I need right now? I mean, maybe I need web development. And there's and one of your sponsors is a web development company, which is looking at maybe having to lay off a bunch of people, or they just don't have a lot of work right now because nobody's actually doing or paying for those kind of services. Maybe they could trade some in-kind stuff for, like actually doing a little bit of work for you that is traded in kind. They don't give you dollars, but you give them tickets to your next event when things do actually come on as a reward for people that are doing some work for you. Like it's a time to be creative, but it's definitely about how can I help you? How can you help me? And like and it's brainstorming. I mean, it's kind of a fun thing actually. I mean, it potentially could be of saying, wow, you guys are in as bad a shape as we are. What have I got? I got a big audience. You got to sell a lot of stuff. Okay, let's find a way to put something on together. Or I've got a skill. Or I do warehousing and I need to warehouse my set. I mean, maybe they can do some trades in those kind of ways. So I think that it's understanding what you both need and being super respectful of them right now.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Our next question comes from Louise Siedel, and Louise asks, you mentioned on the Q&A slide that you mentioned moving events online. What are some fundraiser events that work well online?
Interesting. So we'll make this slides available, and again from Prosper Strategies out of Chicago. Fantastic organization, doing some really cool work right now. And they were taking they're talking specifically, and the slides will go into some of the details about even what is the best technologies used for different types of fundraisers. They suggested that some kind of live event is a good thing. And what they were looking more at is like if I have a major fundraising event that makes up a significant portion of the money that I'm going to be making this year, and it's scheduled between April and August, you either have to entirely postpone it till next year, or look to taking it online. And some of those things that they're looking at taking online were things like you could take your gala online and still do the silent auction that you would normally be doing. Now that's kind of a big production, but silent auctions, raffles.
Sorry to catch you for a minute. Your audio is doing a bit of the kind of.
Oh, do it again.
Cutting in a, yeah. Sorry about that.
Okay, cool. Nope, no problems. Here, let me just cut the video here. We'll see what happens. How's that? Oh,
much,
I got
much better. Yeah, it's really
much better
clear.
again. Okay. Sorry about that. Again, I wonder why that is. Technology. Yeah, sorry, what was I just talking about there? Oh yeah, the online stuff. I think things like silent auctions work very well. Having something where paddle raising is one thing that they call it, where somebody just wants to go in and bid in on something, or raffles. I mean, what I would suggest you'd be doing for an online event is you'd be putting together something like a Zoom room. You'd have whatever kind of arts offering it is that you have right now. You'd be providing some of that. If you did have an event already that was scheduled that you have to change because nobody's coming to, or nothing's happening in person now, there are ways to actually take those online, provide some kind of core offerings that you have right now, but make it a time where people can donate online. And there's some tremendous tools that allow you to do that. I mean, you can manage silent auctions, you could manage live auctions, you can manage just a donation thing, you can manage raffle tickets. But I would do it, usually what you want to do is you want to keep the donation period open for about a week. Instead of a long event, you want to have a short event, kind of an hour-ish or less, that you come online, but you say invite people to, hey, get dressed up and have a drink ready, and we're going to, this is our gala this year. You provide maybe a couple people chatting that we normally be having, doing board chairs, those kinds of things, and some art, and ask people to participate and donate online during that time. Auctions, so you can have it. You can yeah. So there's a number of different ways of doing that. Check out this that webinar slide. That when we pass that on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on a personal note, for any organizations listening, I have a bit of experience doing some online fundraising for various charities. So if you have any questions, reach out to me after. It's just my first name at businessforthearts.org. But by all means, if you have questions, I'm happy to answer. Our next question comes from Katie Fornell, and Katie says, in regards to audience growth, we have been planning to move our festival online now. How would you suggest we approach growing the audience in the time of online events? What are the best platforms, or maybe what are we forgetting to advertise about the event?
Interesting. It'd be interesting to know what kind of event it is. And when you say the platforms, whether you're talking about how to actually put your content online, like through a Zoom or another streaming service, or if you're talking about how to actually get people and get audience to show up. I mean, as far as audience generation, social media is obviously the best place to actually get the message out that you are doing this, that you're putting on something new and unique. For hosting those things, I mean, I've been a festival that I was at recently is now putting on. Yeah, it was a really cool festival, but with worldwide speakers and workshops and yoga and things. And they actually now are every second weekend they're putting on a live festival, and with programming, and mostly it's around. They're doing 2 or 3 hours a day of programming, usually an hour, then another hour, then a break for a little bit, then somebody else will come on, and they're doing that all through Facebook. Zoom is again another potential place to do that, but then to drive audience, I would think that you'd want to make sure that you are reaching out on all your social media channels, all your email lists, your newsletter lists, anywhere that you can get people. And then actually, that it's interesting as well, because what you where a sponsor could benefit you outside of money is if a sponsor has a reach in an audience that you have. I mean, maybe you're approaching them and saying, look, we really want to get to your audience. We want to invite people. This is what we're doing. Can you provide something to us, whether it's money or something in kind, to facilitate this festival? And would you let us send a note to your email list, or would you put us on your Instagram and explain? So sponsors and partners like that, and again, any partners that are actually going to be part of your festival. If it's musicians who are going to be coming, make sure that they're promoting the festival concept through all their social media channels as well. If it's other theater companies that are participating, same thing. It's about pushing and promoting that on every channel that you can find.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question comes from Donna Fong, and Donna says, what type of messages do you recommend for one's website and social media at this time of uncertainty, since prospective sponsors may be following?
I'd be transparency again. I think is really important. I mean, if you are really uncertain and you don't have anything to say right now, as an example, I know a theater company which is already done their season. Their festival is in early 2021, and they've got one other offering in the fall. So they actually get to sit quiet and just say, "Hey, we're here." And they're just doing their regular schedule of releasing and announcing guests that are going to be coming to their 2021 festival. So they don't have to do much proactive right now. They can kind of sit and plan and wait. But if, for example, if you are a and I've even talked to some people through mentoring who've gone from we've had to cancel our spring season and move it to the fall. What you want is the very clear messaging. You want it to seem like it's well thought out messaging in the sense that, you know, when you do have a message, it's like, this is, we have thought about this. We do have a plan. We don't have everything certain because, I mean, it is crazy zombie apocalypse COVID time. But I think having, like, knowing what you're doing, what your approach is, what the outcomes are that you want, and being very clear with that. I don't think that you have to message too often. Everybody else is in their own situation right now, and they're all dealing with their own things. So it's not like you have to send an email out a day updating of what's going on. But I think a good clear message when you've got something, and then if you have an event or you are switching something very significant about your season or your offerings, yeah, you definitely want to have that front and center on. I mean, you could, if you're moving a season, for example, you might want to pin that on top of your Twitter or Instagram, and you definitely want to have that front and center on the websites. But I think showing that you're thinking and that you've got capacity and yeah, and that you're being really smart will be very helpful for sponsors who are evaluating you, going, wow, this is somebody we can get, this is somebody we can get behind.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry in advance if people hear rustling in the background. My cats are up to stuff. Our next question comes from Patricia Silver, and Patricia says, we've been told that in order to connect with high-end sponsors and donors, we need to be seen in the right social circles, which means going to galas, etc. We have never believed this to be a responsible way for a nonprofit to spend money. So do you have any ideas on how to meet the money, essentially?
That is interesting. That is a very interesting question. Because I tend to agree. I know that large projects and stuff that I got as and brought in house as a website developer, it was through the sponsorship that we're doing that made sure that that target audience of arts leaders and decision makers did know that we were there, and our logo and our presence was there all the times, and I was at those events that they would go at. But it's interesting. It doesn't have to be. I see what you're saying about these big paid events, and it's a very interesting question, because then you can start getting into board development in the sense of, like, do you know people who are going to those events who could be an ambassador of sorts for you?
Or I guess, honestly, to interject, yeah, sorry, sometimes at our own gala, what you see is a sponsor might have bought a ticket to that event, but they're unable to attend. And then in that case, they could pass it off to your organization if that's something a sponsor is willing to do. And if you know they may be attending an event. Sorry.
No, you're exactly right, and I appreciate that. Thanks. The truth is, when you start talking to the high end, when you start talking to any sponsor, I mean, they have to have some kind of a relevance for you. You've got to have something that they want. It's not about just trying to attract being hanging around with people who have a lot of money or large organizations. I think it's about actually having a sync up of values, and knowing and understanding that I know I worked with an Indigenous kind of a reconciliation theatrical project, and one of the major sponsors was an oil company, but their foundation had expressly said that or that they were funding Indigenous programs in places where they operated, and we met those criteria. So we knew that to go and talk to those particular people where things line up as far as like what they're trying to achieve and what we were trying to achieve, and you kind of have to find a synchronicity there. But yeah, I mean it's trying to find ways to be at the places where those people are. But remember that it's not just big corps for the sake of big corps. It's about a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Our next question comes from June Reed, and June asks, have you had experience involving sponsors with your strategic planning and research?
Let's see here. Like sponsors with the strategic planning and research. Could you say that again, Monica?
Yeah, have you had experience involving sponsors with your strategic planning and research? So I guess involving sponsors as stakeholders within the programming of an organization is the way I would interpret that question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, well, actually, it's very interesting is that I've also been in organizations where we've wanted to do some strategic planning. We've wanted to do some outreach and some polling and some data analysis that would inform some of our strategic work and analysis. And oftentimes we would get an awful lot of that work done as in kind without having to pay for it, because we'd be offering those groups things that they had value of as well. And sometimes it's a small organization, a small data analysis group that just wants to go to all the events. And sometimes it's about they're targeting all the arts organizations, much like I was in the website world, and they just want to be associated with a bunch of organizations. So they'll do a bunch of free work in order to get their name out there for other people. So yeah, there's definitely ways to if I'm understanding the question correctly, if we're understanding the question correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even when that comes down to it too, like you said, if it's an organization like that doing work for your arts organization, a business like that doing work for your arts organization for free or largely discounted, that could be an eligible sponsorship for the in-kind component of the ArtsVest program. So if you have more questions about that, follow up with your PMs for each region. There's some people asking about that. Okay. Our next question is from Randy, and Randy says, we believe that targeted engagement and connectivity will be an asset for our sponsors and partners at this time. But wondering, in your experience, what resonates better with your sponsors, tracked numbers and/or anecdotal data?
Definitely both, but depending on how it's presented. And again, it's understanding what it is that's important to your sponsor audience. They might be a very data-based organization, like not data-based, but data-based. That they might know that if they have 10 people come into their store, 5 people will buy something. And so it's just a game of how many people can we get through the store doors, or 10 people come online to our website and 2 people buy something. So again, it's a numbers game from there. And if you could say, hey, I'm going to direct 5,000 people to your website, or to come to your shop, they could look at it and go, oh yeah, I know how much money that's going to be worth to me. And that's at its simplest. Other people might have a different interest there in the relationship of what it is they're looking for. They're looking to gain credibility in a sector. They're looking to say that people are saying, oh wow, look, I see you everywhere, that in all the places that I go to, and sponsors, you must really care about this sector. You must really care about dance or theater or museums or whatever it is that you're really interested in, because you want to align yourself. And as an organization, the sponsor organization wants to align themselves. It might not be a dollar figure that they're looking for. It might be a brand enhancement, that they are people that give back. I saw Ford yesterday. I saw an online commercial where they are now selling trucks based on how could you help your neighbors if you didn't have a big truck? And so they're trying to take that approach that they are community builders. They are neighbor helpers. That's what Ford is, because how could you not be, or how, I mean, if you didn't have a big truck, how could you put a hockey team in the back and drive them to someplace they've got to be? And but again, that's a brand recognition. So they're looking more on qualitative than quantitative.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And then our next question comes from Louise, and Louise asks, what if we're new and don't have a big number of followers yet?
You know what? I mean, and this is the beautiful thing about relationships. Not everybody is looking for the same thing. I mean, and again, I mean, somebody might say, like it might be a dentist office that their kids are all in the arts, and they're really interested in supporting, but they also want people to know that, I mean, like, and what we like to support are smaller organizations. We want to go to cool, tiny theaters and be part of these things, or we want to be invited to cool flash mobs that dance companies are putting on in major squares and things like that. We want to know about those things. Those are things that we value, rather than the opera, which has its own different things that might be of value to it. So I think it's really knowing who you are, but understanding as well that, I mean, some of the big name and big ticket people might be looking for very specifically how many. I'm not talking to anybody who doesn't have 10,000 Instagram followers, because that's how we actually get our value, as opposed to there's other people who are looking for a different value. And it's about understanding what your value is, asking them what they want, and having that really good communication, and that's how you look for it. It's you're not everybody cares about a bunch of numbers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But but you also could, though, over time, go that, you know what, we want to attract some people because we really think we're going to have a bunch of Instagram followers. If you work diligently at it for a year or two or three, all of a sudden you're going to have those numbers too, and then you actually doing that. So that's another way to approach it.
That's some of what I've experienced within my own organization too, is like having a bunch of Instagram followers who don't interact with any posts versus having maybe 5,000 who interact, they comment. And that's how you grow and you gain visibility too, as well. It's just a fan base that is active.
You know what, that's a huge point, because I mean, if there's a difference between having 10,000 followers but only 500 ever open up anything up, but 500 opening anything up actually is a pretty good engagement rate, and somebody might be really excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have one final question from Katie Fornell, and Katie says, as a film festival, we would be streaming our film festival online.
Wow.
I'm wondering about how to get the audience to show up and how to tell them that it's happening.
I think telling them that it's happening is going out on every kind of social media stream that you could possibly get. And I think that's a big thing. And as a film festival, I'm sure you've got a number of different media sponsors, or you've got media sponsors and different types of sponsors that you got out there. I've worked with a few film festivals, and I'm guessing that you probably have a few of those, and trying to reach out to those people, trying to reach out to other festivals, because if you're going online and another music festival down the corner is going to do an online fundraiser, maybe the two of you can even just work together to, your audience is the same as my audience and my audience is the same as your audience, and we're going to promote each other. Those types of things are possible. As far as making sure people show up, I've long believed that you don't want to give something away for free, because that when people aren't paying for something, they don't value it. And then if something else comes along 5 minutes before they're supposed to start your being part of your movie or your film festival, they don't show. But if they've paid even $1, or if they had to spend a little bit of time to register, or they've registered and now they're getting your newsletters and emails that are reminding them of when it's happening, just having some skin in the game is really, really important, I think, to get people to actually show up. And then you better have a good movie, because then they'll stay.
Yeah, and then also to that note too, I know Eventbrite is pretty good for getting people to show up to things. Like even as PMs, we would plan with peer-to-peers, and if you forget to put the Eventbrite event as private, sometimes you get randoms walking into your peer-to-peer.
Yes. Yeah.
Definitely recommend Eventbrite.
Yeah, I've heard a few people who've had Zoom conversations with their family that have had random people kind of walk in too. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. But That's the end of our questions. So thank
Mhm.
you so much. If you're an arts organization who has any follow-up for Jay, by all means approach him for a one-on-one mentoring session through Mentor City. So your PM can be sure to track those hours for you as well. Jay, I just want to say thank you so much on behalf of Business and Arts, and as well as the arts organizations watching today, for just all the insight that you offered and invaluable information. So thank you so much. It's greatly appreciated.
I appreciate the time. It's really cool to be a part of it, and thanks for the opportunity. It just like with sponsors, it made me think about a few things too.